I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, we have a pretty interesting guest today who has won a Cannonball run.
Yeah, a mystery man of the car world, if you will.
By the way,
someone who's been around forever.
I gotta say, I think I'm older than you, but when I was a kid, Cannonball Run was one of the first movies.
How rude.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying because of the date, right? When Cannonball Run came out, the original with Burt Reynolds, which was a long, long time ago, that's one of the first movies I saw that really got me kind of obsessed with cars. I'm going to Google it right now to see exactly when it came out.
This guest is Alex Roy. I mean, why delay? This is Alex Roy, who kind of is like this international man of mystery / world's most interesting car guy. I was reading his Wikipedia page, and we should ask him about this. It said that in 2004, he won a British reality TV series called The Ultimate Playboy, which I was not aware of. We should definitely ask him about that.
He has the look.
So I feel like I should give some context here because basically I called Alex, 6 weeks ago because I was doing a story about rallies and especially about Mille Miglia coming to the U.S. And the number one person I know who has done car rallies and Cannonball style runs is Alex Roy. So when we got to talking, it was just like, wow, this is somebody who really has been in cars a long time and also really knows the underground side of it. So like after we got off the phone, Alex, I told Matt, like, we got to have him on because especially in light of electric vehicles and autonomous driving, I just want to hear your thoughts on everything about where we are now with people who love cars and compared to 20 years ago. This isn't really a question. It's kind of a setup. Matt, I don't know if you want to add, but
I think it's weird that we've never actually met in person, to my knowledge, because I've been obsessed with cars and covering like the business side for Bloomberg for 20 years, but I've been following you from afar throughout all of your antics and and also you give a lot of legit important reporting, for journalists on self-driving stuff and on Tesla. But I'm more interested in like the Cannonball Run and the Morgan.
Well, happy to talk about all of it. I mean, actually, Hannah, our conversation went in that direction because there's car reporting and then there's like luxury goods reporting, like Rob Report. But Hannah, to pay Hannah a compliment, is the only journalist who covers automotive who has her own fashion language and can actually justify getting into some of these cars as like not just as a driver, but as the kind of person who would own one. And because most people who buy these cars have no taste at all. And like they don't in any way reflect the brands that they are driving around. They hope the brands reflect on them, but they do not reflect the brands in the least.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah, that's what set me off.
Well,
that's very kind.
Where should we start then? Should we start? We were talking about the Cannonball Run movie. I was saying that it was like the first thing that I watched that got me into cars. I was born at the end of 73 and it came out in 81. So I was like 8 years old, or I was 7 turning 8 when I saw it. And was that based on anything real? Like, had there been a true Cannonball Run before that, or is the race or the record that you set based on the movie? How's that whole story play out?
Okay, so the answer is that yes, there was a real Cannonball Run race that ran from 1971 to 1979. Brock Yates was the progenitor of that. It ran 4 times. Right after it ended in 79, a bunch of Cannonball drivers and fans who wanted to keep going decided to put on what they considered a more professional event with no media coverage, no movie at all, called the U.S. Express. And that race ran 4 times, and the last one was in 1983. And after that, that was pretty much the end of the classic era of cannonballing. But the most interesting thing about the Cannonball Run, and even its name, isn't the race from the 70s. It's where the name came from. And for all the people who think that the Cannonball is illegal, dangerous, foolish, and silly, the name came from a guy named Irwin Baker, whose nickname was Cannonball. And 100 years ago, he was a motorcycle racer. So in the early 20th century, he was hired by the first generation of car companies, Stutz, Gardner, Cadillac, to drive their cars from New York to LA before the interstate highway system existed to prove that internal combustion cars were reliable, affordable, efficient,
That's
and polluted less
cool.
than horses and trains, and were the best way for anyone of any income level to get around. And so it was at one point front page news when people went and did this, and it was for many years. And so that is the person after whom the current illegal races was named.
That's
Interesting.
very cool. So, how did you conceive this idea to attack and attempt a cannonball run?
And by the way, to state, I think the obvious, the Cannonball Run, the U.S. Express, they're not legal races, right? They're all
Not regulated.
well, you have to break the speed limit in order to win, like by a substantial amount for a very long period of time.
Totally illegal for anyone who wants to set a record, but anyone can go. There's no organizing body. There's no rules other than same car stays on the ground and at least one person in it the whole way. Although that might not be true in the future of autonomous records. I got into it the way almost everyone has ever gotten into it. They saw the movie as a kid. My father talked about it. He wanted to go. He didn't do it. And so in the late 90s, I wandered into a nightclub in New York called Void, now gone. And they were playing a film called Rendezvous, which was the famous French
Iconic.
9-minute film
No words.
where Claude Lelouch, the French director, put a camera on the front of a car and drove across Paris in 9 minutes and change. And after that, I'm like, I'm going to do that someday. And so I put that in the hat alongside Cannonball and anything else I could think of. And I'm like, I'm going to do that. Eventually, when I had the time and money in my 30s, I'm like, I did do it. But the thing is, Cannonball, a word, has entered into like kind of the English vernacular as a word to just do dangerous stuff in a car. So it's been bastardized and conflated with so many other things, sometimes by people with good intentions, but often by people who want to bask in the glory of the real thing without actually doing it. And so that is, in my opinion, where most modern rallies come from. Because when people talk about the Cannonball, they call it interchangeably a race or a rally. But in the classic definition, a rally is on a public road, timed from point to point. It's legal, it's sanctioned. There's a governing body, and there are entrants who are serious people, generally in vintage cars. And in 1999, all of these ideas, the conflation, the confusion, the glory, the desire to drive, the fun was all thrown together by a guy named Maximilian Cooper out of London, who decided to put on an event inspired. He says it's inspired by the Gumball Rally movie, but the Gumball Rally movie itself was inspired by the Cannonball Run race. And so to put the timeline together, Cannonball Run race, Gumball Rally movie comes out in 76, Cannonball Run movie comes out in 81, and then 17 years later, this Englishman shows up and says, let me put on an event, a rally, called the Gumball, that basks in the glow of the Cannonball legend.
Leave it to the Brits.
Yeah, that event, the Gumball 3000, launched in 1999, is the modern, it's called, I don't want to say inheritor because it's not a race, but it is the event that changed and utterly the landscape of modern car rallies. Because prior to that, they were vintage cars and an older demographic. And suddenly you had all these people going in their supercars, stickered up on public roads and acting egregiously. I was one of them. And so I went thinking that the Gumball 3000 was kind of a clearinghouse or unofficial proving ground for people who want to do a real cannonball to meet each other. And that eventually they would go do that. And I got there and there was no one who wanted to go coast to coast nonstop illegally. Everybody wanted to go to a party, however, and everybody interchangeably called it cannonballing. And so that is really how I got into this.
So tell us about your first attempt and how you set it up, because it must take a lot of planning. I imagine you're going to want to either have extra gas tanks or like 4 radar detectors or a spotter, or I don't know, but like what do you do because you achieved the fastest crossing, right? What, from New York to LA?
So, yeah, we did set the record in 2006, and we were the first team to successfully break it in, I think, 25 or 26 years.
What car?
In a BMW M5, a 2000 E39 M5. Our record's been broken many times since, and
You did it in about 34 hours?
31.
31.
So the record in 1983 on the last U.S. Express unsanctioned full-on race was 32 hours and 7 minutes. We broke it by a little bit over an hour. The way we did it was really made possible by going on the Gumball 3000 rally and other rallies. So there's one called the Bull Run. There's one, I did so many of them, I forget. And on those rallies, you're in a stickered car and you're in a group of 50 to 100 other cars going city to city with the police generally waiting for you. And so on those events from 2003 to 2005, I figured out what hardware you needed and what equipment was necessary. And so everyone knows you need a radar detector. And at that time, laser jammers were just coming into use and laser was becoming more popular among police. But what we had done is we'd studied the teams from 1983. And one of them had a spotter plane, which flew overhead in the daytime stretch. So using everything I knew from tech startup world, we put in the car triple redundant cell communications for one phone from every network at the time. I forget how many GPSs we had. There were probably 4 GPS displays in the vehicle, 1 for navigation, 2 for speed, 2 more in the back. Every one of them had their own antenna on the roof. Because of the spotter plane, we put a semi-reflective white stripe pair on the roof so the plane could see us in low light conditions. Rear brake light cutoff switches, rear running light cutoff switches, thermal cameras so you could drive at night with no headlights, a 14-gallon fuel tank, redundant replacement parts for anything we could fix on the move, and some things quickly on the ground. And so everything that had ever been done historically ever had been installed in that car at that time. And we tested all of it, except the plane, on the Gumball 3000. The most important lesson from the Gumball was that if you have a highly stickered car in a group of stickered cars, you're running a lottery because it's basically how many police cars have been vectored to a group of speeding vehicles. And if you are early in the speeding pack, you will get away. Take the stickers off with all the skills you learned, it becomes actually pretty easy to speed and not get caught. The hard part is there's no cars running scrimmage for you. So you've got to get really tactical. I know it sounds crazy about safety. And the hardest part is not the car, it's not the driving. It's the research into the road conditions and volume of traffic on the road so you can pick a date for maximum safety and risk mitigation. And that was a lot of trial, expensive and time-consuming trial and error, because the best driver in the world and the best car or the best equipment cannot be safe rolling through packs of pedestrians and traffic. It's not possible.
So you did your run around Christmas time.
By the way, that's
remember
awesome.
Right?
I have to
Yeah,
say, like,
we're kind of
that
shocked.
rules.
We're speechless. You've rendered us speechless, but this was around Christmas, right? If I remember right.
So, well, we broke the record on October, I think 7th, 8th, 9th of 2006, which was very specifically chosen Columbus Day weekend, because you can't drive in the summer. Because road traffic is 3 to 4x higher than other times of year. And police patrols are 3x higher than any other time of year. So that won't work. You need a holiday weekend, preferably, that is a low traffic weekend, and ideally tornadoes, because most law enforcement and first responders are diverted to deal with tornado issues.
Wow.
So that meant Columbus Day was the perfect weekend. And so we had mapped it out, and I looked at like 20 years of data from the federal DOT on traffic and weather, determined that was it, and it turned out that was the right date. However, Hannah, you are correct. Christmas Day would be if it was not snowing and there was minimal to no ice, maybe the best day of the year.
Interesting.
We considered it. We considered it.
So physically, how did you prepare? What types of food
because you had
and
to stay awake.
beverages and stimulation did you plan for yourself along this
and
voyage?
how many people were in the car?
3 people in the car. My co-driver, Dave Maher, who did slightly more driving than I did, and is a better driver than I am. He was an essential choice. And in the back, we had Corey Wells, who's a documentary filmmaker, who was shooting the documentary which we made about the run, which came out a few years later, called Apex: The Secret Race Across America. And she was really essential because she had been making a documentary about the U.S. Express for years and had not yet completed it when we met. And so the availability of the veteran drivers from that time and her knowledge was invaluable. I was physically better shape then than I am now. I smoked at the time, and I was allowed to smoke a cigarette anytime we saw a police car.
Nice.
And which ended up being 3 times the whole way.
Oh my God.
But that was it, because you cannot stop to go to the bathroom. You can only go when you stop for gas, which is a maximum 5-minute stop. And one person's got to stay at the car, so it means one person can go in. So you really can't. There are no luxuries or conveniences.
But did you have a tube
so minimal
or a
food,
diaper or?
I tested diapers in advance. Very uncomfortable. And I had also used tubes in the past on other events. But I learned that if you have a tube running down through the bottom of the car, it leaks in both directions. Cold air comes up.
Oh no.
And it's very awkward. And so we settled on something that was the least bad of all bad choices, a device called a Porta-John or something.
Oh.
It's a thing that can be used by a man or a woman.
Or a woman.
That
I've seen this for women.
that you don't want to use. And we each tried it and decided we would bring them and try not to use them. And we did not use them.
Wow.
It was, you have to be good friends. And even then, it's not the best.
Wow.
How did you? I can't believe you only saw 3 cops going from New York to L.A., if I have the direction correct. And did you have any legal problems like afterwards? Because you publicized it. So did any cops say like, "Well, we knew you broke the speed limit in our state, so we're going to arrest you"? Like
Retroactive.
yeah.
So because no one had done this successfully for 25 or 27 years prior, I had no roadmap and was absolutely terrified of the consequences. Brock Yates wrote a book published in 2002 called Cannonball, in which he states at the end that no car would ever cross the United States in less than 38 hours, ever. And the Cannonball record at that, when he ran the race was like 32:51, I think, in the last Cannonball, then 32:07 in the last Express. And so here he is, 20 years later saying, can't be done. 38's the floor. And so I called my lawyer. I said, I've got a question. And he's like, that'll be an expensive answer. So he started digging around, looking into, I had a book deal at the time for the record we had not yet set. And so he said, well, in worst case scenario, you could maybe get hit under RICO statutes because you're committing felony crimes across state lines, all of them. And you're profiting from it. So maybe an angry prosecutor could come. And of course, there's the felony speeding charges themselves. So I had him prepare a document. It's a wonderful spreadsheet I should send you, Hannah. Color-coded document with the state-by-state, the severity, color-coded of the likely charges one would receive based on speed. Some states have an arbitrary felony charge trigger based on speed. My book tour, I knew would go to some states and not others. So I gave the states I knew I would not ever want to go to Dave Maher to drive. So when I showed up a year later or 2 years later, I wouldn't be charged because I wouldn't be going there. So Dave is like, great, I'll take them. And I also learned that everyone's familiar with the idea of a statute of limitations, but there's also a thing called a tolling law. So if you commit a crime in a state and you leave that state, the statute of limitations clock is frozen until you set foot in that state again. No. So take Oklahoma. Yeah, so leaving the state does not protect you necessarily, because if you don't spend, say, the full 12 months in that state, you can go back for a minute and they can just grab you if they want to. So my attorney advised me that a very cranky prosecutor could just make it his mission to take down that Roy guy, and I need to be very careful about this. So we went and did it, and we were successful. However, before we succeeded, we did have a failed drive. It was meant to be the real drive in April of 2006, and we broke down halfway in Oklahoma City. And this is a story I rarely tell. My teammates left the state, and I had the BMW picked up and taken to the local dealership. And then I went to the airport, and I told the dealership, hold the car, I'll call you in like 6 hours. So at the airport, I called my girlfriend, my mother, my attorney, and told them what happened. And then I flew to, some other city to stop over. And it was a message from the dealership that the state police, Oklahoma State Police, were already there looking for me.
Oh, no.
Hours later. Yeah. And so it turned out that behind me in line at the Oklahoma City airport was the lieutenant governor of Oklahoma. And he had overheard my entire conversation with my lawyer, where I said, BMW, we escaped. They didn't catch us. They can't catch us. And they deployed the entire state police academy to go find the guy in the blue BMW. They thought I was a drug dealer whose car had broken down. And a judge ordered the vehicle held for several days as they figured out what was going on. And on like the second day the car was being held at BMW, an off-duty district attorney who had no idea about the investigation happened to be shopping for cars and spotted my blue BMW, which he recognized from Gumball 3000 videos, and got in the car and turned on the police lights and started playing with the systems. And as a result, I got my attorney to contact the court to declare evidence had been tampered with, get the car released, returned to me, and 6 months later we went back. And that attorney, that district attorney, years later became my friend. And we're friends to this day. And I'm also great friends with the now retired Oklahoma State trooper who led the investigation to whom I sold my second BMW M5 stickered as a German police car.
Can you go back to Oklahoma now? Are you banned from the state?
Absolutely. Okay. No, I'm fully welcome because the DA who was there, who found the car, his family is very close with, I think, the current governor. So I went back more than once and had dinner with a bunch of these officers, and we had a lot of laughs. It pays to be nice to people.
Yeah, I was going to say, your charisma and natural charm does work to your advantage.
How do you prove the run? Like, do you sort of take a picture of yourself with the newspaper in New York and then the next day's edition in LA, or what do you do?
So there was no playbook for this, and the people who had the record previously were accused of cheating. And so I contacted Ernst & Young and Deloitte and every company I could think of, asking if they would send witnesses and if I could pay. I Guinness. Everybody all declined because it's illegal. So I got Jalopnik to send Mike Spinelli, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, to the New York Start, and Davey Johnson, who was one of the famous writers there. Bless your heart, Davey. Rest in peace. He went to the finish line. And then we had a journalist from the New York Times review all the evidence. We recorded all of the GPS devices. And then we had Charles Graeber from Wired magazine go through the evidence. And we also had uninterrupted video off of 2 cameras on the front and rear bumpers, as well as video recorded from the spotter plane. And then we had receipts from the tolls, receipts from the gas. So by our standard, we had multiple corroborating, overlapping, redundant witnesses and evidence, and more evidence that had ever been compiled by any prior team. But I do want to have a shout out right now to the guy who broke my record, Ed Bolian, who broke it 7 years later. because I was so convinced that we had raised the bar on evidence that anyone who came after us would have to meet or surpass it. And years later, when I heard that this record had been broken, I didn't give it the credence that it deserved. Now, of course, everyone recognizes that the record was broken, but I didn't jump all over it to recognize it. And I feel bad about that because they had something we didn't have, which is they had high quality, real time vehicle tracking. And every vehicle that's gone after us just puts in what you see in every truck now, which is a real time transponder that you can watch progress on a password protected site, which is what goes on today anytime someone wants to set a record. So.
Well, 7 years is a really long time in terms of technology advances. I mean, 7 years is a long time.
Well, also, Ed,
It is.
He beat your record in a gas-powered car, but you have set another record in an electric car, right?
Yes. So the current gas record, yeah, actually even Ed's record, which is incredible, 2850, has been beaten multiple times now. But people always ask me why I don't go out and set gas Cannonball records anymore. And the answer is I'm not remotely interested in them because the Cannonball originally in 1915, Irwin Baker, was always intended to be a proof of concept for new technology. So in 2014, I've been watching the Tesla story kind of evolve, and I wasn't totally convinced that the cars were great. In 2014, when Tesla released Autopilot as a software update to all their cars, I immediately was like, I need to do this because whoever is going to inherit the mantle of Irwin Baker has got to go and test new technologies. It's going to electric, hydrogen, hybrid, autonomy, whatever it is. Someone's got to do that, and no one was doing it. And so that is what got me into the EV records. So in late 2014, went across and broke the EV record and also set the first driving assistance record using Tesla Autopilot, which I think we did at like 98% engaged cross country. Wow. And then broke it 2 more times in Teslas in subsequent years. And that was far more intellectually challenging than the gas records, because what is known, like what one has to know and learn to set a gas record is known. There's nothing more to be learned except weather forecasting and potentially incremental improvements in tire technology, because weather and your tire's ability to survive road surfaces at high speed are the only limiting factors of setting a record in a gas car. Whereas in an electric vehicle, it's like 1915 again. In 1915, there were no gas stations. You had to buy gas at a hardware store or pharmacy. And over the years, in the teens and 20s, gas station networks began to get built out, but they still weren't consistent. Pump speeds were different. Pumps didn't always work. It's exactly like electric vehicles today. So to anyone who thinks that EV is not inevitable, ask yourself, what is the rate of improvement of EVs today in their ability to get cross country quickly versus 100 years ago? And the answer is it's the same, if not slightly better than it was at the dawn of internal combustion. So EVs are inevitable. And in fact, I would encourage any car company that wants to save billions, go drive cross country or hire me to go cross country for you, because every problem that's occurred in the EV sector, software, hardware, reliability, we saw this 5-6 years ago. So,
by the way, I want to keep on the EV train right now. But before we get too far away from your Cannonball run in gas, I just am curious, how much of the time were you breaking the speed limit, and how fast were you going, like average and top speed? And was it fun?
It's work. It's not fun at all. Every moment talking about it after is fun, but doing it is work. And the reason so few people do it is because it is work. Everybody in the Cannonball community is bonded by something that people outside just don't understand. You have to do some math, a lot of math, and be a good driver and be really committed. And most people who call themselves car enthusiasts are not actually car enthusiasts at all. They're not. They're as much enthusiasts of cars as someone who buys a really beautiful dress and wears it once and gives it back. Just, you have to, this is a task. You can't go mountaineering in couture. You have to bring the gear.
That's the quote of the day.
Yeah. So, but everything has its place. And so we were speeding, I'm guessing 99.9% of the time. The speed limit was anywhere from 55 to 75. And our, our driving average was 92.7. And our average, including stop time, was 90.4. So we're stopped for approximately 30, 31 minutes just to refuel. And then you're just as fast as you can. Our top speed was 160, but most of the time we were in the 120 range. And we would have been an hour faster, except that I am a more cautious driver than my co-driver, Dave, who really was flat out most of the way, and I slowed down. So.
What happened to the car that you set the record in? Do you still have it?
I still have it. It's in semi-storage in New York. It's being restored to 2006 Cannonball record-setting condition
Cool.
as I consider selling it. So it's period correct everything, period correct '06. Every time I took it out in the years subsequent to going public, it would be recognized generally by a police officer, and I'd get pulled over and they'd want to talk about it. Never got in trouble subsequently, but came close when I was pulled over for speeding in it in upstate New York by an officer who recognized me and the car and stated that he gave a copy of my book, my tell-all of this, to every student in radar class at the New York State Police Academy. And he couldn't wait to see me in court to defend, where I would try to defend myself. So that story is too long for the show.
Okay. Well, you're here with us now.
That story is too long for this show, but I tell the extended version of it on Ed Bullion's VinWiki car channel. It's called The Evidence Story, and it's hard to believe. So today I drive like a baby, an absolute baby.
So going back to Tesla, though, did Tesla help you at all when you were setting records in their cars? Did they assist you, do support in any way in the spirit of R&D?
Did Elon call you and say, thanks, dude?
Okay. Elon never called me. However, I had a good relationship with Tesla's comms team, which existed at the time. And there were some terrific people there.
They were
and
cool.
Yeah, you remember that. There was a woman named Keely
remember.
Solprizio. Keely was very supportive and helped me learn a lot about Tesla Autopilot and charging, and put me in touch with senior people. Sterling Anderson was the head of Autopilot at the time. She connected me with him. And so I learned a lot. And let's just say that they lent me the second record I set was set in a Tesla press car. They did not have advance notice of what we were doing. They did know that we would pick it up in New York and drop it in LA. They didn't ask, and I didn't tell them. And I did receive many likes and retweets from very important people in Tesla at the time. That's no longer the case, as in the years since I have lobbed some criticism at Tesla for some safety issues around Autopilot. But there was a time when they gave, let's just say, tacit indirect approval.
That is wild, because I freak out about dog hair in press cars. So this is putting a whole new perspective on what we do with press cars.
Well, if you consider the irony of it all, is that 100 years ago, car companies would literally pay for people to set records in their cars. Yeah. And today, what is the dream headline for any EV maker today? The dream headline, and every car company making an EV today is 5 days from having this headline, is Company X beats Tesla. Because it's almost impossible to get that headline in any category of performance or metric. Lucid could do it for efficiency, but no one can do it with front page headline setting time unless it's done, literally a Cannonball record is set. And they, of course, are all concerned about legal issues. So what is really interesting about Tesla and EVs and charging is that if a car company wanted to beat the EV record that was set in a Tesla, the window when it could be done opens every year for a few months and then closes. The first generation Porsche Taycan, technically, the range is shorter than the longest range Tesla. However, the battery technology and some of the EA chargers that it could connect to are better. So there was a window when a Porsche Taycan could have broken the record. that window closed with multiple software updates from Tesla and the improvement of the Tesla chargers. Lucid currently is probably the only EV that could be used to break the Tesla record. The Lucid longest range Air battery pack, 516 miles, is 20% longer than a Tesla. But it would require that the chargers have an uptime equivalent to the Tesla charging network, which they do not. And so there is an arms race among EV manufacturers to enable a third party like myself to go do this. But currently the record is basically sitting, I think it's 42 hours in a Tesla, and it will sit there until the charging networks available to non-Tesla companies achieve a level of reliability that Tesla has always had.
What about an electric hypercar like a Navara? And
Is that the Rimac?
Yeah,
Okay.
the Rimac Navara. And also, is that a liability just because it's so much flashier than something like a Lucid sedan, which blends in?
Yeah, it is. Any sports car looking car is a liability. You have to have an innocuous vehicle, and it must be with the largest battery pack and the best efficiency, combined with a network with uptime as equivalent to a gas station, or you're just not going.
So it's not about top speed at all, really.
Nope. It's pure math. So right now, the power density of electric batteries of any technology is less than that of petroleum. So until those lines cross, and they will cross, you are at the mercy, you are hostage to the inexorable, terrible devil's math of power and efficiency. There's no way around it. I have tables, like calculation tables that just about this. And every time an EV manufacturer releases anything, I enter the car and the table and to determine if it can be done. But the choke point today is not the cars. It's the chargers. It's the chargers.
Alex, I wonder about the... You obviously are a super enthusiast, and you like interesting and sort of niche cars, the Morgan three-wheeler being one of them.
Oddball.
But also you like, everybody likes an M5. Can you be passionate about an EV, like the driving experience? Do you enjoy it?
So I daily drive a Tesla. It's my fourth. I love it. So EVs have gotten a bad rap in terms of driving enthusiasts because we have not yet really seen an EV
with soul
that is productized in the way that a car enthusiast would want it to be. So let me just unpack that. So there are Tesla Model 3 Performance is like on paper, like the perfect car. Why do car enthusiasts not like it? Well, no sound. So I would argue, yes, lack of sound is a thing because we equate analog cars are not great just because they're analog. They matter to us that we connect with them because we are analog. Our heart beats, we can hear it. We run faster, our heart beats faster. We get scared, heart beats faster. We can feel the blood pulsing in our veins. So we are connected to our own bodies with exertion. Hannah, you used to be a runner. You know this.
Yeah, still am. Not as fast, but
athletes
still
understand that. People who understand exertion and physicality understand cars in a way different from others. And so a vehicle that when we change gears, it is analogous to the psychological decision to I will now, the final sprint in a marathon. Like I'm changing gears now. And you do it in a car, it's the same decision. And the noise changes in the same way the noise changes in our heads when our heart rate's that much faster. So an EV that lacks, that doesn't have a parallel set of sounds and feelings to what we feel inside ourselves, because that's what we do in a car too when we get scared and excited. We react. An EV lacks that bridge connecting the driver, the organic human analog driver, to what the vehicle does. Now, the corollary to that is that an EV, because the power is linear and the noise floor is lower, in a way connects us much more deeply than any analog vehicle to the actual act of driving, because the outputs of driving fast are quicker, less time. And an EV will do those things that analog cars can't do. And so for someone to drive an EV faster, better than they do an analog vehicle, they have to be willing to give up that bridge, but intellectually connect with a vehicle that will do more of what they want better than any ICE vehicle. And the community does not really recognize that. What few professional drivers have raced in Formula E, they get it, but everyone else doesn't get it. And I think that the enthusiast community will have to age into it, and then the next generation of kids after that will just take it for granted. But the other half of this is something that I'm very disappointed to see, which is that virtually every car company in the planet working on EVs, and there's very few exceptions, Rimac would be an exception. Everyone else is shoehorning electric powertrains into internal combustion thinking. And they've made it with this concept of the software-defined vehicle. And their notion is, oh, well, we'll offer subscription services with these EVs. People will love it, just like a phone. No, that's just not true. The only thing we want an EV to do is be cheaper and more reliable than an ICE car. Other than that, most people just don't care. The missing piece, the piece that will connect with enthusiasts, is there's only one company thinking about this really well. It's Hyundai. So Hyundai's new Ioniq 5N, the racing edition of the Ioniq 5, has fake engine sounds. Many companies have done this, but most of them are terrible. But Hyundai's did it with a purpose. They offer not just fake engine sounds, but a fake synthetic gearbox, paddle gearbox, with synthetic gears that mimic actual driving gears. You can redline the car. So now the car sounds and feels closer to an ICE vehicle. And you have all the benefits of learning how an ICE vehicle drives, but none of the downsides of potentially damaging it. So you actually have a vehicle which you could learn to drive an ICE vehicle better. And this is tip of the iceberg, because ultimately, and I wrote about this 10 years ago, every legacy car maker that has a brand or a model whose brand is more powerful than the parent brand. As an example, the Corvette is worth more than GM. An F-150 and a Mustang are worth more than Ford.
Yeah.
Now, 911 is probably worth more than Porsche. Every company has one model like this. Jeep is worth more than Stellantis. So each of these companies has a 50 to 100-year library of sound and feel, and enthusiasts who want that sound and feel. And in the future, because knowing those cars aren't made anymore, people will want that sound and feel. What is the future of software-defined vehicles? The only future is one where you can buy a future 911. It's a skateboard that looks like a future 911. But on board, you can subscribe to the sound, feel, and physics of every 911 ever made. Pick your year. Porsche will download physics model, sound, and feel into the car. And the car's chassis itself, they'll need some kind of actual dynamic chassis that's far more evolved than anything we've seen yet, to actually mimic oversteer, understeer, and while doing all these things inside a software-defined boundary that prevents a crash. Because the dream of everyone is to have a sports car that does whatever you want that will never hit anything. We're very far from this, but that is the dream, and we'll only get there via software-defined vehicles from OEMs that have legacy. So, because the new ones have no legacy.
I'm so curious, all day today and this week we've been looking at earnings, and so many automakers have walked back their predictions and their estimates for EVs and their production goals. How does that strike you? Are EVs, it sounds like you're saying EVs are still the future, even though it seems like there's quite a stall in demand.
So when I say EVs are inevitable, like Fight Club, on a long enough timeline, every technology's success rate's 100%. However, it is very likely that there will be an interim phase where hybrids supersede internal combustion, and that will play out over decades, after which EV will supersede hybrid. However, the other issue, which is a political one, China has most of the rare earths required to build EVs. So they can churn out EVs all day long that are better than anything made in the West, except maybe a Tesla, and sell them throughout the world. And they have already started. And so if the United States wants to compete in these markets, export vehicles anywhere in the world, they need to start churning out EVs. And so in the absence of a supply chain that could support, EVs sold at scale, something else must be done. Hopefully, some of the sources of these rare earths, some of which are in the United States and some elsewhere, well, many of them are locked up, for environmental reasons, some of them for political reasons, will be unlocked so American car makers can compete with Chinese EV makers. And the second thing, which I'm very optimistic about, is that J.B. Straubel, formerly of Tesla, has a company called Redwood Materials, and they recycle batteries, and they are just starting to scale. So between the pressure to compete with the Chinese EV companies and the potential of Redwood Materials, I think there'll be both a stick and a carrot to get American car companies on board with EVs. But hybrids are going to become a bigger thing first. And, really all this it's tiresome because these things should not be politicized. The market should have to decide. And the market has already decided that if we don't compete with China, our car companies are going to be, not going to go away, but they're not going to be what they were.
Alex, we have to wrap it up because of time, but I have to say, dude, you have blown my mind.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
the amount of insights that you have, I just haven't heard anything like this from any of the top car executives that we talk to, and it all makes sense. So
where can people find your work now? I mean, where to get more of you? Where should we send our listeners?
Well, I have published very little in recent years, but I have a podcast called the Autonocast with Kirsten Korsak and Ed Niedermeyer. And I suggest following me on Twitter or LinkedIn. On Twitter, I'm AlexRoy144. If I may just say one last thing. To everyone who ever said that driving would go away and that kids aren't getting their driver's licenses, I worked at a self-driving car company for 4 years. All of them are wrong, and human driving will never die, even when autonomous vehicles are available at scale cheaply.
Love it.
I hope you're right about that.
I'm on board with that for sure.
I know I am. I take Waymos every day, but I'm always going to own my old Morgan and my old Porsche. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alex,
Thank you so much. I hope we can have you back because that was really incredible. So I truly appreciate it. And
anytime.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, Hannah, but we'll see you back here same time, same place next week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.